And I was always hungry. I wasn't really listening to any reason. There are 3 people in your marriage. That's how powerful marriages are, and it was the most stunning thing I've ever seen. I think they have demonic help. Hello and welcome back to my channel. As you saw the title, it's a Q&A time. Thank you very much for all your questions, and we have a variety of questions, some more about my or our past, some about my views on certain things, and a few others, so let's dive in. But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed, you've liked the video. Thank you very much. I've got my questions, and let's start with my past, childhood, how we met, and so on. What is your earliest childhood memory or memories? So my earliest childhood memory is of me being among sand dunes. I was apparently 2 or 3 years old, and my parents took us to Canary Islands. I believe it was some kind of island in the Mediterranean Sea, and I know you very rarely have memories when you're 2 years old, but that's like the only imprint I have. I see all the sand dunes, and it must have made a very big impression on me. Some other very vivid memories is when I was going with my mom to pick up my older sister from school. She went to school quite far away, so we had to commute there, and I would take my cat toy with me. I still have him, a black cat. And my small rucksack, and we would go to pick up my older sister. I was always hungry on the way there or on the way back, and if my mom didn't bring food with her, she had to run to the supermarket and buy cheese and like sausages and yeast. I love the yeast, and I would eat like a whole sausage and yeast and a big chunk of cheese, and I was always hungry. These were lovely memories of going with my mom to pick up my older sister. How did me and my husband meet? How did we start a relationship? What were my thoughts and feelings at that time? I did mention it briefly in my last Q&A video, but we met in 2012, and my husband was an immigrant from Egypt, and I was working as a social worker, and we met that way. I was working in a charity organization which he attended, and we met that way. I had a lot of apprehension. I was thinking of how difficult it might be with different cultures, slightly different religions, different traditions, all of that. I was, though, very madly in love, and I wasn't really listening to any reason. But yes, I had some apprehension, I was scared. I did discuss with Bola a lot. He was more crazy and wanted to get married. But since we are both very religious, he was Orthodox at that time and I was Catholic, that was something that we had in common and very important to both of us. So that's the foundation, our faith, that we have built our marriage upon. Next question, where did we marry, and was it a ceremony in 2 countries? So that's an interesting question because it opens up a whole different topic, because I need to explain how it is marrying in the Catholic Church, how it is in the Orthodox, and I'm going to explain a little here. I think it's very interesting. But we married in Poland, in Warsaw, in 2014, in a Catholic ceremony with a few Orthodox elements. And luckily for us, Bola's parents were able to attend the wedding. They were the only ones from his family that could come because of how it is in Egypt. It's very difficult to leave Egypt and even to come and visit. But they were able to, and then my family attended, but not a very extended family, just a close family. And Catholics and Orthodox are almost identical, but there are a few differences in our faith and in the liturgical rite. But Catholics can marry an Orthodox, and Orthodox can marry a Catholic in a Catholic ceremony. And that is because in the Catholic Church and in the Orthodox Church, marriage is a sacrament. The Catholic Church has 7 sacraments, and one of the sacraments is the sacrament of marriage. There's also the sacrament of priesthood, the sacrament of Eucharist, of Holy Communion, of penance, and so on. A sacrament is also called the secrets of God. A sacrament is a visible sign of God's grace. And a sacrament is something unbreakable, it's something supernatural, and it's something holy. So what it means in the Catholic and Orthodox Church is that the sacrament is unbreakable. Once you marry, you're always married. Once you become a priest, you're always a priest. You cannot leave priesthood, you cannot leave your marriage. And since it's a sacrament in both churches, it is allowed to marry, even though one of us was a Catholic, one was an Orthodox, but you need a bishop's permission. So we needed bishop's permission, and we got married in the Catholic rite with a few Orthodox elements as a Catholic in the Catholic rite. He also had to sign the papers, and me as well, that we are fully aware of the consequences and implications and all of that, meaning that in the Catholic Church you are also obliged to raise your children Catholic and so on. So going back and explaining a little bit more about sacraments, what it means for marriage is that you cannot get divorced in the Catholic or Orthodox Church. And of course there are instances where it becomes impossible to live together because of some addictions, abuse, or criminality or whatever, or just one person decides they want a divorce. What the Church allows is to become separated and not live together, but you're still married in the eyes of God. And if one person would want a divorce, because they lose faith or whatever, or both people want to get divorced even though they married in the Catholic or Orthodox Church, and knowing that it was a sacrament and unbreakable, they get divorced, but they never get divorced in the eye of the Church and in the eyes of God. So what it means is that you have to live in celibacy. You're still married to that person. You cannot pursue other relationships or other marriages. And if you pursue those relationships, you're not living in communion with the Church, and you are sinning gravely, and you cannot, for example, receive the Holy Communion because you're excluded from the Church community. A fun fact that it also means that if two people got divorced, because what I mean is, they get divorced with the authorities, not with God. So if two people get divorced, they are still married in the eyes of the Church and God. If they would want to remarry, they don't have to remarry in the Catholic Church because they were married all this time. They were divorced. I mean, of course, they could have some private ceremony to mark the occasion. But what I want to say is that marriage is for life in the Catholic and Orthodox Church, and it's a sacrament in both churches. And because of that, there is a lot of intermarriages between Catholics and Orthodox. Of course, there are marriages between Catholics and Protestants and Jews and Muslims, but it's a completely different story, and it's not a binding sacrament for one of the parties, and it's a completely different way, and you don't have this communion with each other. A marriage in the Catholic Church is something holy, and marriages can be very difficult, of course, but the moment the priest binds you together, you receive graces from God that you cannot receive in any other way, any other kind of wedding. You receive such graces and Holy Spirit that it becomes something supernatural, and it becomes something holy, and it becomes a marriage between you and your spouse and Jesus Christ. There are 3 people in your marriage. You're all married together, you, your spouse, and Jesus Christ. That's how powerful marriages are in the Orthodox and Catholic Church. God Himself will give you graces to stay in the marriage, and if it for some reason is not possible, you're still married, you can live separate lives but in celibacy, because you're always married to that person. That's how it is, and that's how it should be. Of course, there are a lot of people who married in the Catholic or Orthodox Church, and they do whatever they like now. They remarried, twice or 3 times and so on, but that's not according to the Catholic faith and Catholic Church. 2 questions for Bola now, and I asked him, he was kind to answer. One is what he does for a living. So at the moment he's working in a corporation. He worked for many years in a different corporation with Arabic language, but he was very happy to change his job some months ago, and he works in a different corporation at the moment, and he's happy he was able to change. And he's able to work from home some days, and some days he has to go to the office in Warsaw. How does he feel, my husband, about my work on social networks, on social media? He also answered that he's had both positive and negative feelings about it, so he's been always very supportive, and he saw that it was bringing me joy for the most part. Sometimes I have been fed up and disappointed and had enough of YouTube, and as you may have seen. But of course, when he saw that I am upset, he would tell me that maybe it's time to quit, there's no point, or maybe, if your channel is not growing, maybe it's just time to give up or quit. We would have these discussions sometimes. He also said that sometimes he feels tired if I take out the camera, but as you see, I rarely film him, but it's only happened if I was filming a lot of vlogs and, maybe on a vacation or something, the camera was out a lot. But other times, at the same time, he would tell me, oh, pick up the camera, this is very interesting and nice, exciting, and film this. And sometimes he says, oh, I'm doing something, I'm working with something exciting, it would be nice if you filmed it. So it's both negative and positive. Sometimes he's fed up with it, sometimes he enjoys it and wants me to film him or us, and he's been always very supportive about it. That's basically what he said. Next question is, what is the most beautiful location I have ever traveled to, and how did it make me feel? I haven't been to all the exotic places, which I would love to, all over the world. I haven't been to Australia or New Zealand. But one place that immediately sprang to my mind was a village in the mountains in Georgia. We were there 5 years ago, and we're staying in a different town, in a different village, and to access that village in the mountains, we had to take off-road. We were traveling in a jeep, and it was the worst road I've ever been on, and it took many hours, even though it wasn't so far away. And we arrived in those mountains and to that village, and it was stunning. And there were horses there, very local, very old-fashioned Georgian village. The mountains were so beautiful. The air was crisp. The atmosphere was like from some movie, from some adventure, historical movie. And it made me feel ecstatic and happy and completely present in that moment. It was one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. Georgia is extremely beautiful. I recommend you to go there. And the second most beautiful place, and probably more beautiful than the one in Georgia, that I've ever saw, was Petra in Jordan. If you've seen Indiana Jones, one of the Indiana Jones movies, the old ones, they filmed some parts in Petra. There are these amazing houses and formations in the mountains, in the rocks, carved out in rocks, temples carved out in rocks. and you approach it through like a small road, like a tunnel with this high mountains, so you go like in a tunnel. When I saw it, I was in awe, and it made me feel again happy, ecstatic, in a flow. I remember these 3-4 days we were in that area in Jordan. I was 18 years old and I was there with my sister. And those 3-4 days imprinted themselves on my mind, and it was the most stunning thing I've ever seen. It was more beautiful than that village in Georgia. It was majestic. And another great question is, what gives me great happiness? I think I've mentioned it, but maybe not in this context. One of the greatest happiness is for me is submerging myself into a lake or a sea, especially if it's beautiful or the sea is in some gorgeous color. I don't know how to describe it, but in those moments I am in a state of flow. I actually was mentioning a state of flow in my last video. I was on a walk and I reached a state of flow, and it happens extremely rarely, but it does happen sometimes at the sea, the lake, at the river, when the smell is, everything, all the elements, are at the right place. The smell is amazing, the air is amazing, like the sun is shining, all these things together make me enter a state of flow, and a state of flow is probably the state where you feel the most happy. I've also felt the state of flow in a few other parts of the world, in some mountains, in Petra, as I've mentioned, in Georgia, as I've mentioned, and I also feel the state sometimes when I paint, only for a few minutes, but sometimes when I paint. And in general, what gives me greatest happiness is probably traveling, being in nature. Those moments that I felt like I'm reaching a different state of mind. Pure joy. That's traveling, that's the sea, that's the mountains. 2 more questions because I'm talking too long. Because this Q&A is taking up too much time already. What I think about modern media of our time, and social media, and the development of artificial intelligence. Curse or blessing? Oh my, that is a question. I will try not to speak too long on this topic, and I want to focus on the development of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, I think artificial intelligence is evil for most parts, and there are 2 ways I see it. One, that they have a lot of technology they are not showing us yet. I think they are already capable of influencing our minds and things like that, but they are not showing those things, those devices, this technology yet. They are hinting at it. And I also think that the governments, the globalists' pursuit of artificial intelligence is completely fueled by demonic power. You might disagree with me, but that's what I believe. I don't think humans themselves are capable of inventing the kind of technology that they are actually inventing at this very moment. I think they have demonic help, and that's why they will use this technology in a very evil way. That's what I see for the future. That's what I believe is going to happen. They are already experimenting, for example, on Chinese soldiers to make them superhuman, to give them superhuman qualities. And there are a lot of things going on around the world at the moment. In this peace and quiet, that is just a preparation for what is to come. So to answer your question, artificial intelligence will be our distraction. Artificial intelligence will lead to horrors we've never seen before. It's coming. And it's not going to be nice to experience that. That's my take on artificial intelligence. I could say much more, but that's it. And the last question for today: what do I see positive and negative for the future for Poland and Europe? That's also a very big question, and I will try to make it short. I don't see any good things for Europe. Sorry. I see some good things for Poland, not because I'm such a patriot, but because that's what science are showing us. I think this question ties to the artificial intelligence question, and I don't see a lot of freedom for Europe at all. In the very near future, I see enslavement and a lot of bad things happening, like one currency, one government for the whole Europe, one religion, one everything. That's what is the plan for Europe, so it's very negative, to say at least. For Poland, I would say similar things are approaching, but I think Poland will be spared from the worst part of that. Because setting aside, all the science and everything else, Polish people are inherently free inside, and we are all freedom fighters in a way, even though a lot of the spirit has been lost, but we are inherently free. We want to be free as a nation. I think we will not allow to be enslaved, and I don't think God will allow that. Poland has been given up to God and His Holy Mother by kings before, and God has helped Poland in many ways. Let me ask you this question. Do you see any positive things for Europe in the future? I honestly don't, but maybe you do, so let me know in the comments below. Wow, that was long, I think. Thank you again for all your questions. If you agree with me or disagree, let me know in the comments below. And I will see you soon with my next video. Have a wonderful day, all of you. Bye.